I'm Scott L. Miller, and this is Sam IT on YouTube. Today, I want to talk about a topic that we all in IT, well, if you've been in IT for a long time, you've heard how we say that IT professionals really need to know the soft skill of selling. We say this all the time. You hear it a lot. And if you haven't heard it yourself, be prepared. It's going to be coming at some point in your career. You're going to hear people say you really need the selling skill because you're going to have a solution. You're going to have an idea. You're going to have value for your business, and you got to talk them into it because someone else is talking them into something else, right? Some other department is trying to get your budget. A vendor is trying to get your budget. A vendor doesn't want your ideas to be the ones that are presented. They want their ideas to be the ones that are presented. Makes sense, right? So we need the soft skill of being able to sell because the better we can sell, the better we are equipped to go talk to our business and convince them that we have the right solution for them. This sounds kind of reasonable. I think a lot of IT practitioners will instantly say, why do I need to be selling? Right? Why? This doesn't quite make sense to me. It feels wrong. We kind of understand we need to convince people to do what we want them to do, but we kind of need to step back and look at a lot of components here that don't feel right. Well, it's not that I want the business to do this. I mean, I kind of want the business to succeed. Why would I be in IT if I didn't want good things to happen to the business? Okay, that's fair. It makes sense. But it's not about what we want. And we've talked about that in another episode. It's about we spend our time doing good IT, hopefully. If you're watching this channel, you're probably someone who takes their IT pretty seriously. You're probably trying to do the right thing. So we're already assuming that we're trying to do the right thing for the business. We have put in an effort doing the research. We have a proposal that we believe makes sense. Of course, we could be wrong, but we believe we're putting forth our best effort. Why should we then have to try to convince our employer to listen to us? It feels wrong, and it feels wrong for a reason, and that's what we're going to talk about. This episode is not about that we need to be salespeople. We'll talk about that some other time. This episode is actually geared much more towards the CEOs, the CFOs, the COOs that the IT department is coming to talk to. Maybe this is the head of the help desk coming to talk to them. Maybe this is their CIO sitting down at a board meeting. Maybe this is an IT director who needs to get an approval for a budget. Whoever it is that is coming to management, this is the people they're coming to that I'm specifically speaking to. And if you're IT, maybe take this and share it with your organization as something that they should be aware of. So, looking at you, Mr. CEO, because I've sat in that seat. I've advised financial departments, right? I've sat in these different spots, and there's something we need to think very carefully about, and that is, what is it in our organization? Maybe we should think about other organizations, assuming we have a great one, right? What's making others have this happen so often that as an industry, IT is starting to believe that they must make an effort to train their practitioners to be able to convince us to do what is in our own interest, and more importantly, what is specifically our jobs, whether we're a CEO, a CFO, and presumably a COO, all of those senior roles, or president, or legal counsel, or whatever, our primary job, unless stated otherwise, is to look out for the interests of the business and the shareholders. We're here to do the right thing. We then, presumably, don't know everything about IT. Makes sense. Why would we? Then we hire IT practitioners and IT professionals and people who really know IT and know what solutions are out there and know what we can work with. And they're tasked with bringing us recommendations based on what they know of our environment, based on what we've told them are the factors that matter. And when they come to us with that, why would we require them to convince us to listen to them? We're already paying them because we believe in them. If we don't believe in them, why are we paying them? Right? So presumably there's the possibility that we're simply dealing with bad hiring. We think we've hired people who are no good. We should address that. We should not have people working for us that we distrust. Maybe we don't trust them yet, but we still shouldn't be looking at things from a sales perspective. They shouldn't be trying to convince us. They may just have to give us facts, right? Here's how much money it's going to save. Here's how much it's going to cost. Here's our opportunity for growth. Here's why it protects us. Here's how it meets industry standards. Here's why HIPAA regulations mean we have to do these things. Great. They can give us those facts. That's not selling us. That's just filling us in on the details that we need to know. That's okay. But once we have those details and we know that this is the recommendation of professionals who are paid to look out for us so that we can look out for the bigger picture, why would we then decide that we will only accept those recommendations if they can then convince us to do the right thing? Just saying this tells us something's wrong. Convince us to do the right thing? That's the kind of thing you say to a mugger when they've pulled a knife on you in the street. Hey man, do the right thing, walk away, don't stab me, right? Don't take my wallet. We're using the same kind of terminology in the IT side when we talk about a lot of management at companies that we work for, right? We have to convince them to do the right thing, because if we don't manage to exercise our sales skills, in many cases, we believe, and maybe IT is just really wrong about this a lot of the time, but having worked from both sides of the fence and the amount that I see this, I don't believe that that's true. Sometimes, certainly, but not to the degree that would account for what we see in the industry. What we're seeing is actively acting against the interests of the business unless IT can convince management to do otherwise. Imagine what that is that we're saying. That means intentionally violating fiduciary responsibility, acting without good faith for the shareholders and the owners. Now, of course, in many cases, we're talking about the owner of the business, and we have to convince the owner to do the right thing. This gets into a fuzzy area that we're going to talk about in another video about real businesses and hobby businesses. Of course, an owner who's running a hobby business, see future video if you're not sure what that means, wants to not do things that feel like they're in the interest of the company, like they don't want to make money, or they don't want to protect against data loss, or they don't want to avoid a lawsuit, or they just don't want to grow, whatever. If they're a hobby business, and a legitimate one, and they don't want to do those things, that's fine. One would have to question why they've hired an IT department and not explain to them what their goals are, if that's the case, but that's kind of another discussion. But assuming we're not talking about a hobby business, if we're talking about a legitimate business whose goal is business, that is to make profits for the owners or shareholders, investors in whatever capacity, then under what condition is it acceptable for anybody in a management position to ever require someone to convince them to do the right thing? We can distill this to convincing them to honestly do their jobs, right? This is a question of politics within the organization. And if you're being brought this video by your IT department, we'll presume that they don't believe you're doing this intentionally. And maybe they don't think you're doing it at all. Maybe this is simply a discussion point that gives you an opportunity to sit down with your IT department. Maybe they're even a new hire and they want you to watch this before they really start so that you can get on the same page for communications. That's great. Assume that if they bring this to you, it is an opportunity for self-evaluation and to think about how you interact with IT and other departments. Hopefully the finance department isn't having to convince the organization not to throw money away on bad tax decisions, right? Or by using OPEX when CAPEX would save more money. Not that it does, right? Just that's why you have a CFO, to make complicated financial decisions and oversee those things, right? The same as your legal department, right? Let your lawyer tell you what's a good idea and bad idea legally. Don't second guess them all the time. And if you do, replace them with someone you won't feel you have to second guess. But don't replace them with someone who just tells you what you want to hear. Never do that. Unless you're a hobby, then maybe your hobby is having people tell you what you want to hear. With IT, the same thing. Make sure you're hiring someone you trust. Maybe you don't trust them to get the answer right all the time, but you at least trust that they're acting in your interest, and your interest being the company's interest, that you are all on the same page. Make sure that you're not putting them into a position of feeling that they can't trust that you're going to act ethically in the interest of the business unless they talk you into it. Make sure that they feel that they can come to you and tell you they believe this is the right answer. And if you disagree with them, that you should sit down and have a really honest conversation about why you think there's a difference. And it's possible that you do, right? The CEO is very likely to have insight into things like company growth or opportunity that IT may not. IT may simply see trajectory over time and project that for the last 5 years, there's been 10% growth every year. That's excellent. We're projecting it for the next 2 years, so we're planning on a budgetary process around that. Excellent. The CEO may know that there's a giant market opportunity that they expect to miss out on, and they expect to see shrinkage of 5% over the next 2 years rather than growth of 10, and that investing in the same things that IT thought was a good idea now don't actually make sense for reasons that IT may be kept unaware of or simply not understand. That's perfectly fine. That's why there needs to be a discussion. That's why IT needs to present high-level facts to management, whether CFO, CEO, whatever, so that they're able to take those guidelines given by IT under advisement and apply what are potentially industry secrets to them, or possibly apply financial information to them, right? IT may say, we need new desktops because a 20% faster desktop may give us a 50% increase in productivity with only a small extra amount of cost. Great, put those numbers together. Finance may be able to tell you things like, well, our cash flow is really tight right now, but if we wait 3 months, we can do that. But if we try to do it before 3 months, we're going to take a huge penalty that is larger than the savings that will happen in the interim. That is something that IT may not be able to come up with on their own. These departments or teams or people need to act together towards a similar goal. Great. No one has all the answers. That's why we have teams. That's why we have multiple people. But none of those departments should ever be in a position of needing to sell between their departments. Your IT person or anyone else should be able to have good ideas, should be trusted to be acting in the interest of the business. And when you trust those things and they come forward and they bring you information as a manager, as an executive, you should not be poo-pooing them. You should not be looking the other way. You should not be saying, I don't feel like doing those things unless you talk me into it. You should not be putting them into a position where they need to convince you once they've presented you with the correct information. Of course, it's easier when they do that, and it's great for anybody to have those soft skills. But it is a danger to our organization to in any way make that actually a significant factor, because any department that has those skills will use them in the interest of their own department. It's just human nature. The operations team, if they have great sales skills and IT doesn't, they're going to prioritize because it's things that matter to them. Oh, they want new manufacturing equipment. They want new cars to drive around. And they'll come up with great reasons why they should have them. And maybe they should have them. But they may end up taking that budget away from IT because management listened to the sales process and didn't listen to what was good for the company. They didn't actually evaluate it. They let it become emotional. Sales only works when we're allowing emotions to take over, right? And theoretically, in a business process, we should never be making emotional decisions. It should always be based on the math. Business is, at the end of the day, math. Of course, we have to apply some amount of emotion or gut feel to it because there's so much in business that you can't account for, not because math doesn't exist, but because we don't know all the numbers. We don't know if we change the price of our product, how many people are going to change buying and not buying it based on the price. Even if we do lots of studies, we're still just guessing for the most part. So there's some amount of gut feel that goes into that, and that's reasonable. But we have to understand that sales, letting sales become the things that drive our decision making, mean we are choosing not just in the moment to prioritize emotions over the interest of the business. We are then sending a signal to those departments, as many IT practitioners have had driven home to them, that doing a good job doesn't matter. That providing the best answer, or what they believe is the best answer, doesn't matter. Acting in the interest of the business doesn't matter. What does matter is flashy material and having a vendor to back you up and having advertising and magazine ads to show you and being able to walk through the airport on a business trip and point out the big billboard that is the product you got the company to buy. All those things are things you should generally avoid, not 100% of the time, but often. They are signs that businesses need flash to move a product that can't sell itself, right? The IT department would never try to get you to buy this product if there wasn't a bunch of advertising that helped them in a sales process. These are the products that they're choosing because they don't trust you. So if you send this message, an honest, hardworking IT department has little opportunity to do anything but distrust management. And their options are give up and just let the company do whatever it's going to do without the advantage of IT insight, or to play politics and spend their time doing things that aren't useful, like coming up with sales tactics and accommodating their solutions to not look into what's best for the business, but to look into what they're most likely to be able to sell the business. And they'll take these playbooks straight from resellers, right? Resellers universally choose what products they are going to sell based on two factors. One, how much profits they generate per unit, and how easy it is to convince you to buy. Now, an internal IT department may ignore the first one and only worry about the second, but the overall factor is similar. They're going to look to the products that VARs are able to sell easily, and then maybe work within their best options within that subset of things, but they're going to be forced to sell you most likely extremely expensive, low quality solutions, because those are going to be easier to sell because that's why they exist. They are set up for that purpose. And so your IT department, who normally you would hope is there to protect you against the VAR, is going to end up, even if they're being completely honest and just acting the way that you teach them to act, like a VAR. And that is not in your interest, right? The department that you hire for the purpose of giving you good advice and protecting you from bad advice is going to start selling you bad advice because you forced them to. So at the end of the day, I want a takeaway of we have responsibilities as managers, as executives, as presidents, and whatever, to look after the business, whether it's investors, owners, ourselves. If it's your business and you own it, you don't have to take this advice, right? You can operate as a hobby. You can ignore what's good for your business. You can ignore profits. You can ignore the people you've hired because it's your money and it doesn't matter. But if it's not your money, if you're actually acting as a real business executive, you have a responsibility to act in the interest of the investors. And if you're an owner, think of yourself as an investor and ask, why are you investing in a business that you yourself do not believe enough in to protect? That responsibility tells us we should be looking out for places where we're making anybody in our ecosystem sell to us, rather than hiring them to give the right advice and either trusting them and taking that advice, or at least looking at the numbers and treating it rationally, or distrusting them and not using them for advice anymore because they consistently maybe tried to sell us something that wasn't as good. And if our IT department is trying to sell us things, maybe we should sit down with IT and say, I don't know if I've sent the wrong signal. Maybe you've worked somewhere in the past that gave you bad signals or played politics or was just dishonest, right? It happens. Don't let IT keep selling to you. Sit them down and have a talk. I don't want to be sold to. I want to be given good advice. And if I don't listen to that, remind me of this conversation, because we all get emotional. We all make mistakes. But IT and executive staff can work together and create a more powerful company that operates with better decision-making, fewer politics, and keeps everyone aligned and working towards a common goal of profits and success and growth, instead of playing politics and trying to figure out the personalities of the different people involved and what we're going to be able to convince them to do. And instead of spending our time on our skill set, IT, operations, finance, legal, HR, putting our effort into sales internally and trying to convince each other to do the best thing that we think is easy to sell. I'm Scott Miller. Thanks for joining me. I want to remind everyone that I actually work for, and I've for 22 years have worked for, a business and technology consultancy. We are ntg.co. And if you like what you've seen here and you're interested in working with a company like us, whether for IT advice, IT outsourcing, staff supplementation, and even CIO and CEO advisory services, we work across the range because IT is a business function. So we spend a lot of our time, even though we're primarily focused as a technology company, working to help businesses understand how to work with IT, whether it's their internal IT staff or us, or both in a hybrid environment. We run the gamut. So we would love an opportunity to speak to you about how we can work with your organization to bring ideas and concepts like this to you. Thanks for joining me.
NTG, supporting business and technology globally since 1999.